Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with the Intimacy Doctor Alexandra Stockwell, MD. Dr. Stockwell is an intimate marriage expert who specializes in coaching couples to build beautiful, long-lasting, passionate relationships. She is the best-selling author of Uncompromising Intimacy, host of the Intimate Marriage podcast, and creator of the Aligned and Hot Marriage program. For over 20 years, she has shown men and women how to bring pleasure and purpose into all aspects of life. She is a wife of 26 years and mother of 4. We cover some good ground here. Enjoy this interview.
Okay, Alexandra, thanks for taking a minute out to the show today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So before we get into your life and your work, I want to know, the last couple of years with the pandemic's been quite trying. And, for a lot of people, there's been silver linings. But I'm curious for you, how did you survive the pandemic, and how did it change the way that not only the way that you live your life, but the way that you conduct business?
It's a good question, and I'm almost embarrassed by the answer, but it really did not have a significant impact. And I'm not in any way minimizing the pandemic or its impact in general, but for me personally, I've been working exclusively online from an office in my home since early 2017. And I continue to do that throughout the pandemic. I'm a physician and a relationship and intimacy coach and an intimate marriage expert. And I work with clients all over the world. It used to be that when I would meet new clients, I would say kind of tentatively, have you ever heard of Zoom? Because it was such a new technology. But since the pandemic, I, of course, don't ask that question anymore. So I've been doing business, conducting business in the same way. I think the content of the work that I do with my clients has been deeply impacted the pandemic. But in terms of my business and my business model, it really hasn't shifted because of how it was originally set up.
To get a handle, I understand on paper what you do, but I'm going to kind of simplify just a little bit here, and I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. One of the kids looks up at, okay? All right.
Yes, I love that.
That's the context. All right. So one of the kids looks up and says, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Okay, what I say to that child is, I teach grown-ups how to be really happy with one another, how to say what they want to say and be able to listen to what their partner is saying.
The thing about that idea is that it seems very simple. It's kind of like the whole idea of everything.
It doesn't seem simple to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just have to say it does not seem simple to me based on what I see.
Well, I get that. I guess what I'm trying to say is when you hear those words, you would think that's what human beings should do. That's what children are always taught to do. And I guess that's where I'm getting to. It's like, how did our leap to adulthood make this such a difficult thing to do? Because I think that would be one of the top problems that most relationships and couples have on this planet.
Okay, I really love how you asked that question. It reminds me, you've probably seen that poster an article that says, these are the things I learned in kindergarten. And it says all of the basic, most profound skills that we all need, but don't actually have, at least as a society. The thing is that when it comes to relationships, communication, intimacy of all flavors, we really learn through imitation. That's how mammals learn. That's how animals know what's safe to eat and what's not safe to eat in the wild. It's how we learn to put sentences together. It's all through imitation. And the problem is that we don't actually have any good, reliable education unless we happen to be in a very, very, very rare situation where that was modeled well at home. But for the most part, even when people have good relationships, how to actually have one isn't modeled for the children. It's not taught in schools. The main sources of education end up being movies, porn, women's magazines, having a fantastic relationship is entirely a learnable skill. I just wish that more people prioritize getting the education that they need.
Isn't a lot of that muddled up because most of the things that you mentioned are prefaced off of monetary ideas? It's not prefaced off of what's the best thing for the human being. I mean, and that what really messes this up for everybody, because we do get these messages from, art and music and TVs, and it's so flawed.
Yes, that's interesting. Of course, there's a lot of money-driven, greed-oriented messages in our society. That's certainly true from the media, but I haven't actually thought about it that way because the main place that adults first learned how to be in relationship is in their family homes, and their parents are not driven by money. They're really driven by their own inadequacies. I mean, the vast majority of parents want their children to grow up and learn how to have good relationships. So the money isn't the first negative influence, although then it becomes one.
Yeah. So when you were in the third grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I was always so interested in everything. And in fact, when I graduated from high school, I didn't know what I was going to major in, so I made sure to do general studies so I could learn all kinds of things. And it was actually painful to choose medicine because I thought, I'm cutting out all these other things I'm interested in, until I discovered medicine is actually such a broad field. Although I'm realizing when I think about your question, what I really wanted to be was a sophisticated spy where I could use my intelligence, my wit, my charm, my memory, my beauty, be able to slip dangerous substances into the ambassador's glass of wine in order to help the good guys win. That's what I wanted to do.
So in your current capacity with who you are and what you're doing now, are you happy with how everything has turned out?
I am. It was an indirect route, but I absolutely am. And one of the things that has me be happy in my work is that I feel like every single life experience I've ever had, whether it was happy, whether it was terrifying, challenging, whatever the flavor of my life experiences, I'm able to use every single one in service of other people's growth. Because when I am coaching couples on how to enjoy one another more, how to be more honest, how to know what they desire and how to communicate it, invariably they get stuck in one place or another. And in addition to the very expensive training I've done and working now with thousands of couples, I also have my own lived experience as a really great resource to tell stories and inspire people how to become unstuck themselves.
So, all of us get these seeds in us when we're young to become who we are, like now. What was your childhood like? What were the seeds that were put in you that made you become who you are today?
When I was 9 years old, my parents got divorced, and that was in 1974. It was an amicable divorce. In fact, in those days, it was $25 for a do-it-yourself divorce without attorneys and so forth. And it was a massive change in my life, but it was relatively peaceful. There was no big conflict, no broken chairs, and my father actually came for dinner every week for about a year after my parents got divorced. And so I didn't really think about it as a major influence or trauma. It was just something that had happened to me. And before my internship, I participated in a cultural sensitivity training, learning how to provide good medical care for people with different cultural backgrounds. And in the process, we each identified our own cultural bias. And I grew up a New York Jew from an intellectual, quirky family and assumed, well, of course, that's my cultural bias. But when I went through the exercises, what I discovered is that actually my cultural bias comes from being a child of divorce. And it just opened my eyes to how that was the lens through which I interacted with my husband and my children and my friends, that it had really contributed to my identity in ways that I really hadn't appreciated before I did this training. And so I think you can easily connect the dots, but I am just completely passionate about showing couples how to have fantastic relationships where passion and good communication lasts through the decades, because that is the way to provide their children with a completely different experience than the one I had.
So who has been consistently a role model or a hero for you?
I adore Michelle Obama. I think she is able to be herself and respond to people where they are, and wherever she is, she adds more light.
So you may have just answered this next question, but if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now and talk to them, who would it be?
Well, I definitely would love to meet Michelle Obama, and I'm thinking if there are others. You know, there's somebody else I'd like to meet. Edith Eger. Do you know who she is?
I've heard the name.
She is a Holocaust survivor in her 90s and one of the most inspirational people who speaks about how you can turn your life into something wonderful, and that the way you feel about your life is in your control, something that she already knew when she was in a concentration camp.
What is it that motivates you every day? You know, when our alarm clocks go off or however we wake up in the morning, you know, we all have these things that we want to do, things we look forward to. And it drives us to do things in our lives, to achieve things. What is it for you that you look forward to doing every day?
Well, I don't know that this pops into my head first thing, but one of my really big motivators, honestly, is to change the cultural narrative around long-term relationships, because most people assume it's just inevitable that passion dies off. The best we can hope for is a pleasant companionship, and that just isn't true. So my really big desire that when I come up against challenges in business or I'm just not sure how to navigate something is to reconnect with what my true motivation is, which is, like, I would love in 3 generations that it's not so much the divorce rate per se as much as the actual quality of relationships that people are having. I just want the cultural norm to be totally different than it currently is.
You know, as an expert in your field of relationships and intimacy, you know, there's things that us lay people don't understand and see. If you could boil down one of the most common mistakes couples make that can be fixed, what do you think it would be?
To become more curious. Because one of the things that happens when we are, in relationship and familiar with one another is we stop asking questions. Sure, we have conversations about logistics and those kinds of questions, but the kinds of questions you're asking me, I've actually been very impressed with how you're interviewing. Like, ask your spouse, if you're listening, whom would you like to have dinner with, and what would you ask them? If it could be anybody, anywhere on the planet. What was the most challenging part of last week? What is the thing you're most proud about currently? There are so many questions that we just stopped asking, even though every individual continues to grow and evolve and have new experiences. And the lack of curiosity essentially contributes to a disconnection and numbness. And I guess the one thing I'll add is, if you think back to the feeling of being in love, it's just filled with questions. You want to know, where is that scar from, and what were your favorite vegetables in childhood, and what did you want to be if you hadn't taken the career path you've taken? Like, the feeling of being in love includes so much curiosity, and one of the ways to have more of that feeling is to become more curious with the person you already know so well.
One of the great things about age is that we get that chance to kind of gain wisdom and insights that we don't when we're young. And I'm curious, if you had a dream tonight, you ran into your 20-year-old self, and based on what you've lived and the wisdom you've gained and the avenues you've chosen, you could give your young self a piece of advice. What would be that advice?
Make a point on a regular basis of slowing down enough and identifying how you feel, and then keep moving forward with that awareness and honoring it. I think we become numb to our own experiences, and that never serves us well.
I agree. What's been one of the best fan letters, client responses, so to speak, that you've gotten from the work you've done?
Ooh, I have a whole collection, but I was just preparing an email to send to my list, and it includes one, so I'm going to reference that. This is a man who, peak of his career, a subspecialty surgeon, super successful by all measures, who had never done any therapy or coaching of any kind. And when we met, I'm quoting him. He says, "I met Alexandra when I was in crisis. Resentment and years of frustration had accumulated to the point where they were overwhelming me, and I did not have the skill set to answer the challenges that I created for myself." And then he went on to say, "I am deeply indebted to Alexandra. She has tremendous insights and is a wealth of knowledge and guidance. She not only saved my marriage, it is stronger, more passionate, and more rewarding now than ever before." And that was after 5 years of infidelity.
Let me get to the essence a little bit of who you are. And everyone has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think that I am very competent. I can meet people where they are, and I'm well-spoken, and mostly I'm aware of how much further I and everyone else can grow, and that sometimes is a positive contribution, and sometimes it's a tension that can hold me back.
So, Alexandra, if anyone out there wants to know more about you, your services, anything pertaining to you and your life and world, where's the best place for them to go?
AlexandraStockwell.com, and from there you can listen to my podcast, the Intimate Marriage Podcast, my book, which includes things like being more curious and other very simple things to implement that radically improve and transform your relationship, and all kinds of things. The best starting place is AlexandraStockwell.com.
Alexandra, thank you for opening up. Thank you for explaining and talking about your world. I really appreciate it. Good luck with everything. Have a great 2023.
Thank you so much, and thank you for such an exquisitely high-quality interview.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, love, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube, on Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.